Hello and welcome to Cinema Spotlight with Jake and Reuben. However, this week, Reuben has jetted off to Scotland for St. Andrew's Day celebrations. So we have a wonderful guest host for you, friend of the show, Deanna Orlando. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Jake. Thank you so much for having me on. I am so excited to be a part of your regular roundup of the latest films and re-releases hitting screens this week.
Every episode, we're celebrating a different independent London cinema, giving you the lowdown on all the food, facilities, and overall experience. And this week, we went to Art House Cinema in Crouch End.
This week, we head back to the tropical islands with Moana 2.
And Catholics Run Amok in Conclave.
We have a stunning portrait of women in Mumbai with All We Imagine Is Light.
And we revisit the Christmas classic, with Polar Express. We also sit down with up-and-coming filmmaker Maria Michael as she talks about her amazing new film, CatWalk.
This week we'll start with Moana 2, where our favorite character Moana finds new adventures with some new characters and some loved old ones as she ventures to the depths of Oceania. Did it live up to the first film? Over to you, Jake.
Over to me. Now this film was, I wasn't hyped for it at all. I didn't think there needs to be a Moana 2. I don't think there needs to be a live-action remake. I don't think we should really sully the name and experience from the first one. The first film, bear with me as I glow in recommendation. Go watch the first film if you haven't seen it.
No, I completely agree, so please.
But it's because the first film is one of those very special films that when I went to see it in the cinema with my family, my mother gleamed about it. And my mother is she's wonderful, but it's quite reserved when talking about films. But this film really spoke to her and my entire family, and I was like, well, that is really the test of a great film. And it really is. It really connects you to the spirituality of her people, of her character. Is so it's modern Disney without a bit of that fluff and that bit of that trying too hard nature that you get with a lot of modern Disney. She is well-rounded. She fails and she strives for greatness. She's a great character. And in Moana 2, to be honest, I was very happy to see her again. She's developing a little further, but it just feels only incremental. It doesn't feel like there's been as many years as there has been between what she went through in the first film compared to what happens later. To be honest, the character of Maui, who comes back, is still cocky, and Dwayne Johnson provides his typical brand and bravado, better than Red One that we reviewed, the worst film of the year. I'm locking that in, everyone, Cinema Spotlight. That was our first review, for goodness sake. But he is still charming. He is still charming in the film and doesn't have the arrogance of the first film. He's egotistical, but he actually provides what Moana provided to him in the first film later on, which I thought was a really nice thing about the film. I just think this has the Disney sequel problem. It feels like a Disney sequel from the Renaissance era. That is straight to DVD.
100%. I couldn't agree more.
I know it was supposed to be a television show that was then hastily reformatted into a movie, but I didn't actually feel like that.
Yeah.
Because I actually thought the story felt like a film. It just felt very lacking weight. The stakes are somehow a little bit higher. They travel to slightly more. Well, not really. It is a rehash of a lot the same.
I would argue that the stakes are not higher, actually. And my biggest qualm with this film was the lack of emotional depth, I would say. In the first film, Moana is driven by this internal desire to save her people. She has this familial connection to the stakes. Whereas my biggest question with this film was, why should I care? And yes, it has the universal messaging of bringing people together and wanting to unite the seas. And I do think that messaging does hold weight. And you don't need to have a personal connection to it in order to care. But I do think that with this film, although I love the connection between her and her sister and how that kind of was driving Moana as a character throughout, I did think that overall there was just a lack of knowledge for me as an audience member as to why these characters even need to go to the depths that they do or make the sacrifices that they make She's not trying to save her own island. She's trying to save another island with people that she's never met before, with environments that she's unfamiliar with.
It feels like they were desperately trying to figure out what she needs to do now.
Yeah.
That Moana cannot just be this excellent wayfinder. She has to be a savior, a sort of messianic figure almost,
Yeah.
as she was in the first one. You know, I am the chief's daughter. I am Moana. I can really save my people. I can do what we were. I can reinvigorate our legacy, our ancestral legacy. But this time they're really pushing it, and it really does feel like a mirror image of the last one, a rendition that is just cheaper. The songs don't work as well.
No.
I don't think they're bad, and I'm no huge fan of Lin myself, but Moana's music I think is his best work.
Yeah.
But I really think it was just a copy of it, really.
The songs and the story are following this cookie cutter format that we're finding with a lot of biopics nowadays as well, which is it's the same story, just thrown together in a different environment. I will say the elements that I really loved about this film were the qualities that really linked it to its traditional influences.
Oh, yeah.
Like the way that it's able to represent Polynesian culture, even like the animated representation of the islands of Tahiti and bringing that to screen for children is so important. And I completely agree about Moana. I think that as a character, what she represents is way beyond, little pun there, way beyond what I ever dreamed of seeing as a little girl watching Disney films. I think she is the epitome of a strong female Disney character that doesn't have any complications in terms of knowing her own strength, but rather goes on a journey to discover how she can use it.
Yeah, I believe that Moana is, if not my favorite of the modern Disney ilk, but also of the previous. Of these, and I know they make the joke in both films that she's not a princess.
Yeah.
That's another problem in this film in sort of repetition. And
yeah.
sequels have that problem. It feels like that very typical 2 problem, which is they try and make things bigger, but they keep everything else the same. You know, they try and do what every sequel does. They add more characters, they add more villains, but then there's twists and turns that really just feels quite empty, and the resolution is just really the same again. That's no much spoilers, but it does feel just echoes of the same thing.
I'm so glad you said the thing about the villains, because that was another point that I really wanted to make. Was it was just unsatisfying. It was just disappointing. Also, the lack of a physical villain. Completely. Like we and I know that in the first one it's a slightly similar thing where we're dealing with the powers of the gods, we're dealing with this zenith height level of good and evil. But I think in this film it really, really caused issues in the story, because we don't know who we should be. Like, we know who we should be rooting for, but we don't really know who to root against and why. Again, that raises my questions of, like, why? Why is Maui getting involved? Why does he care? Again,
why is he back?
Why is he back?
Does he actually need to be back? I think it might have been even more interesting if the mythos of that character and the journey that they had in the first film is just an inspiration to her. He could have come back as, and I know these sort of extended cameos of these famous people, but it might have actually been better that Maui is actually just a force. Like, this movie is about having all this, the past come back to help you, sort of your legacy and what you were before, your peoples and your soul, basically. It's about how your soul and how the gods reflect that, how your ancestors and the future generations, such as Moana's sister as well, how it all encompasses a great life and how to become a better person and succeed in what you strive to accomplish. However, it could have been a bit more like that, a bit more like what the grandma is, a force ghost that comes and.
Yeah.
But this movie, I knew the grandma was going to show up because the beats were just so identical. But to be honest, when I had a moment in the movie, the coconuts returned.
Yeah.
They returned, and I thought, oh my gosh, it really is hitting the same beats. And I quite like their inclusion. It was better than the inclusion of the people I can't remember the names of. I thought, oh, a little troop of people to go on a journey. I love that trope of let's get the band together and let's go on an adventure.
Sure.
But everyone felt cookie cutter. Everyone had their tics and everyone had their archetype, and it didn't progress beyond that. You've got the guy who's Maui super fan, and then he succeeds in being Maui super fan, and then you've got the builder, the engineer, for lack of a better word, even though there are no engines, and she has a brilliant rap song, of course. That's sarcastic, by the way.
I think this was another issue I had with the music in this film, was none of the songs achieved what they sought out to achieve. And when I say sought out to achieve, the lyrics quite literally say what they want to achieve. The first song is called We're Back. Congratulations, you stated the obvious. Like, that was such an issue I had with the lyrics in the music, was everything was so literal to the point of like, you can trust kids to understand nuance. Like, I understand that this is a kids movie, but you can trust your audience, and I will say this across the board, kids or not, to be able to pick up on emotional nuances, which the first film managed to achieve. Yeah. And I also think that with this whole rapping thing, my like hatred for rapping in Disney films, another huge part of it is that it is so unbelievably overdone now that it's not new. It's just been done one too many times. And it's been sanitized.
It really is. There is no, like, I believe Dwayne Johnson's rap in the first one, in You're Welcome, is actually very enjoyable because it gets a lot of information across very quickly, which is a necessity for that story. He's telling his story as the demigod, and you need to get through it quite quickly, but also in a stylistic way that fit Dwayne Johnson's talents as a not very accomplished singer, but also he has the personality, and he gets that across in his rap. This one is like, I could barely understand what was actually being said in it. It just really, as you said, it's overdone. It is sanitized, and it has no oomph anymore because people are just like, oh, they're just gonna. I knew it was gonna happen. I knew it was coming.
You know it is. And another thing is that, like, especially his song in the film, it comes at this moment where Moana has reached this point, which I will say I did like that she has this moment of, I finally have everything that I've wanted, the powers that I want, my family is safe. Why do I still feel so empty? Why do I not feel good enough? I did think that was a good, a good
Moana's
story.
Still solid. She is.
She's great. But then again, like this, and they joke about it in the film that he's not good at cheering her up. And then the song is bad, so it doesn't even cheer the audience up. Even beyond the like titular song of the film, it doesn't feel like I want to get up and get involved.
And it doesn't have the success of How Far I'll Go, because that film now has become one of the iconic Disney songs.
It really
has. It's sang brilliantly, and it resonates on the same level as Let It Go and the classics, Part of Your World. It has that ageless, timeless quality with a great performance, and as she is still good in it, brilliant, but really I'm going to be more positive for a second in the fact that this has a quality that I think I appreciated, which was when I went to the cinema and when I went to see the first one, it felt like more encompassing, that everyone could see it and enjoy it, and everyone did, and I think that's why it's so successful. They're really trying to recapture that brilliance. But it does have the same issue as Frozen 2, that it has a couple of moments that I really enjoy. Like, I like the fact that they don't abandon her when things get tough, her team. They're like, no, actually, we still believe in you because you did all this good stuff. Why would we abandon you now? We're not just going to throw away our care for you. Because that's a really human feel. Like, why would someone do that? It's not labored. That was actually a really nice moment. But I went in this, and there's a lot of young kids who are watching it who were so excited about just seeing Moana again. And then when they were exiting the cinema, was like, when's Moana 3? When's that coming out? I was like, okay, that's great, because whenever she was on screen, I heard people cheer. And I was like, that's brilliant, because they do get her right. I think, it's been, and you said she had a great breakage moment, because it wasn't, it's something that we'd all face. She's been so successful in becoming the Wayfinder, the top Wayfinder. been anointed this, this, as I said, messianic. She has been given this elevated position that she does achieve with, but she is still human. I think that's a brilliant thing to understand. Other than that, everything else, I agree with you.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you. I think that this second film definitely didn't carry on the legacy that the first one will continue to have. I wish that they hadn't made it so that the first one could shine in all its height. But I do agree. I do think that Moana as a character has this incredible quality about her to bring people together. I think that the way that it was able to represent Polynesian culture, bring that into its story constantly, and really have representation that other films don't have in many different ways. I think it gives this film slight qualities, and also I would say the familial aspects as well. Her connection to her sister, that really connected with me as a little sister. The whole big sister, little sister thing was a great moment for me. So it did have some shining qualities in there. So overall,
it was fine.
It was okay.
Now we talk about our next film, which is Conclave. The Pope is dead, the throne is vacant, and the papacy is panicked. Bring your rosary beads down to the cinema to watch Conclave. This film...
Lots to say about
Lots
this
to
one.
say about this film. I would love, before I give anything away, before I sin before God.
Oh no!
Let me. What
hear
did you
what
think?
I
Let me hear what you thought.
Listen, All Quiet on the Western Front was such a success. It was like legacy making in terms of filmmaking. Do I think that this follows that in every single respect? No, but I think he uses the same qualities that really drove that to its success and to the height that it is now at in terms of like film canon and film conversation. And I think he used them well. I was utterly impressed with all of the performances. I thought that it was visually striking and horrifying at moments that I was not expecting. I thought that the use of sound in All Is Quiet and then also in Conclave was piercing to the soul. I felt so involved in the story. However, I will say that I did think that the story had some plot issues, and I struggled as I got through the film to feel like it was moving forward in any sort of way. But I will say that overall, I did think that this film was striking and beautiful and thrilling.
Well, that's very interesting to hear. And I really like your perspective as an actor. I think it's a really nice thing. And I'd love to talk about it a little more because I do agree with you that the performances were very, very strong. As you expect from this roster of greats, these giants. Ralph Fiennes, who is one of the finest, not a pun on his name, sorry Ralph. But yeah, he is just commanding. And as the dean of this whole conclave, yes, he does lead us through the film. We are through his eyes.
It was incredible.
It was very severe in the best way. Stanley Tucci is very good. I also enjoy John Lithgow in anything and everything. He towers above people. He's given quite a little to do. I wish he was given a bit more.
That was another thing that the marketing around this film completely threw me off of, is that they market it as Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, and John Lithgow, but Sergio Castellitto is in it way more than he is as Tedesco.
There is a word that I'd use to describe this entire film that I was thinking when I was leaving, which is inconsequential.
Okay.
I believe that this film has this grandiosity, this pomp, and this beauty of visual design, and it looks like it's important. However, to me, nothing. Absolutely nothing. I felt very little. This is a film about the finding a new pope, the leader of billions of people, of one of the largest sects, of one of the largest faiths. And I found that everything was very loose. Like you say, it's a great script. I believe that the great actors elevated this great script. However, it was I thought the character development and also the evidence of who these people are was as thin as Bible paper. It tells us a lot about these people that aspire to become Pope, these people in the running. Everyone has black marks on them. And we're told that. We're told that these people are not right for this papacy. We are told all this stuff. We are, like they are in the film, we are sequestered in this this giant in the Vatican, but we are closed off from the outside world. And that can work as a play. And I'm not here to watch a play. I'm here to watch a film where the acting...
Would you not argue, though, that some theater plays or, shall we call it, like bottle-esque films that exist within a container, it has drama and conflict built into it? No, and that's one of the things I really loved about the film.
No, it does. It does. And the mystery, I was on the edge of my seat to a point because the mystery was really interesting. Like, who are these people? Like, how do we judge them? What have they done to try and maneuver themselves into these positions? However, I found that the resolution, or revelations, to use a more punny word, were just so unremarkable.
Especially the final reveal. I did think that was explained way too easily.
And again, inconsequential. It really had no weight. That was my big problem with the entire film, is that everything felt like it was grander than it was. It felt like there was this visage of and discussion of faith and discussion of sin, but no real understanding of what those two things meant.
I agree with you to a certain extent. So in terms of plot, utterly, completely agree. One thing that I will say, and I think it's a point in the film that completely disarmed me, was Lawrence's speech in the church before they start voting. And he says, "Certainty is the enemy of unity," I believe is the line. And that entire speech, when he talks about doubt and uncertainty and how doubt exists so that faith can exist, I think is the encompassment of this film. And I think that it fully achieved its aim in terms of story in having the audience members have doubt and uncertainty throughout the entire film. Whether those revelations, as you said, are satisfying or not is another argument in and of itself. But I do think it achieves its aim in having the audience wonder constantly about their own faith in the characters. I never once trusted Lawrence, but you're following him throughout this entire journey. And you are meant to see him as this figure that is holding this conclave together when actually he's the one pulling the strings to rip it apart. And I think that dichotomy within him as a character automatically instills this conflict within you watching it, because you're not sure where you're supposed to be in terms of things.
Yes, there is a part of me that is intrigued by the fact that I don't know all the information until our guide, our narrator, almost the narrator of the film, guides us to it and delivers this information and how he acts on the information. And you're right, he is untrustworthy and he does have ambition, even though people believe he's so adamant that he doesn't. But though I think the fact that there are twists and turns in this movie that I thought you would never guess, but also some that you could. Like the actual eventual point of who becomes Pope, I knew from the first 20 minutes into the film.
Yeah.
However, again, it's only talked about. I believe, and I think that it's delivered brilliantly. Everyone's got these booming, deep, powerful voices that resonate around the halls of the Vatican like you want it to. And I love the use that it switches between Italian, Latin, and English quite fluidly, which is so beautiful, as you'd expect, which I think is really good. They didn't shy away from that and just make it completely English. But the fact is, I want to see these people being either bad Catholics, good priests. I want to know what drove them into the positions they're in, because it's not an easy decision to just decide to be, or to devote your life to the church, not only to the church, but the actual papacy itself, and as cardinals. I felt like liked the fact that we didn't know all the information, but then into the movie, I'd become tired of that. I become these still people I'm just very exhausted from because I don't know anything about them. I'm just making presumptions off very little information. And yes, that works for some people. But for me, I just felt, who cares who becomes Pope? Because they're all scoundrels. And I find that what you do makes some very good points. And I think that I can look at it from that point of view and actually maybe change some of my perspective on the film. But yeah, it just felt very, it's beautiful to look at, but the final shot of this film felt wrong. The penultimate shot felt right to end the movie on, like the actual idea of the whole movie is encapsulated on that. And then it just ends on a very sour filmmaking note for me. Like, I can kind of see what, and I don't want to spoil it here, but you can see that it's transitional or finding a way to escape the sequestering, trying to escape this cabin film that we've been in.
Also feel it was a bit disjunct for sure, but I do completely agree with you that when it comes to plot, they do kind of fall flat. They jump and they reach this kind of climactic height where you get excited and you get to the edge of your seat, and then you fall off a little bit. But the visuals are just undeniably stunning. And I think that it carried me through the entire film because the way that they use framing and light and focus to direct your focus was masterful. I do think that the visual strikingness of this film, the use of language, its thematic tone were such strengths. It is just such a shame that I didn't feel like the plot and the realizations that these characters make, that you make along with them, were as satisfying as I wanted them to be.
Its cinematography is excellent. The dialogue is excellent and delivered excellently. But if you want anything a bit deeper, I think you have to seek out something a bit different. I think the film needs to go to confession and and have a few plot-related sins confessed upon. But yeah, I'd recommend it to people who want to just go for the visual and to see these great actors. Other than that, I don't think I can rate it any higher.
Also, if you want to see Ralph Fiennes go, no, I can't know anything unless it's really good.
Yeah, unless it's juicy.
Unless the drama's really juicy.
I think our producer said, "What is Gossip Girl?"
Gossip Girl in the church.
In the church, the Vatican's rendition, but yeah. And so you've heard our divisive thoughts, or maybe just my own divisive thoughts on Conclave. However, our regular film critic maestro himself got to see the movie, and he wants to also tell you about it. So we're going to go to Reuben wherever he is, and you can see what he had to say about Conclave.
Hello, cinema spotters. I'm so sorry that I can't be with you this week, but I'm actually here in sunny and slightly windy Edinburgh. I just wanted to let you know how much I enjoyed Conclave, which is the new film by Edward Berger. It stars Ralph Fiennes and Stanley Tucci, and it tells the story of the high-stakes election of a new pope following the death of a progressive and left-leaning pontiff. Now, I thought this was a really, really interesting film. It's based on the novel by Robert Harris, and you can kind of tell because all of the characters are incredibly layered. They're very kind of complicated figures, and I thought it did a really good job of kind of delving into the complexities of religion and politics and the ways in which they intersect. It also, I think, is a really fascinating film from a visual point of view because, you know, whereas All Quiet on the Western Front, which was obviously nominated for Best Picture, Edward Berger's last film, that was very kind of maximalist. It was all of this, you know, incredibly bloody carnage of war. This is a much more kind of stripped back chamber piece, essentially. Most of it takes place in the Sistine Chapel. but I think that Edward Berger does a really good job of kind of, interrogating the role of art and iconography within the Vatican and within the Catholic Church. And it's so interesting the way that he juxtaposes all of this classical Renaissance architecture and sculpture and painting with these kind of stripped back, clean, modern living areas that they're living in. And it really gets under the skin, I think, as well, of the sort of the mythos of religion versus these people as, ordinary human beings. We see priests smoking. There's a fantastic shot where, we just see a load of nuns on a bus, and it's really kind of interested in the iconography and the demystification of the Catholic Church. So I thought it was really interesting. I was at a Q&A with Stanley Tucci and Edward Berger, and it was interesting hearing them talk about how different people react to the films depending on their own religious and political views. I think if you're perhaps someone who is in the church or somebody who is Catholic, you might watch it very different to somebody who is atheistic. So it's overall a really fascinating, very stripped back, very different film to All Quiet on the Western Front, but it has these fantastic performances by Ralph Fiennes, by Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, and Isabella Rossellini is in there as well. So it all comes together in this kind of fascinating and incredibly beautiful tapestry, soundtracked fantastically as well by Volker, who obviously is a regular collaborator with Berger. So I think we'll be talking about this for a while to come. It will definitely be in conversations come Oscars and come awards season. Definitely catch Conclave in cinemas this week.
And don't worry, to all you die-hard fans out there, he'll be back next week with his amazing insight. And now for something very special. We sat down with Maria Michael, the director, producer, and writer of the film CatWalk, and discussed her amazingly ambitious sci-fi dystopian fantasy film. Check it out now.
My name is Maria Michael, and I am the writer, the director, and the producer of CatWalk. CatWalk is about a fashion competition, a dystopian one, where aspiring costume designers, they're trying to win the competition and be the next inspiration of the world, the next idols. The biggest challenge is to bring all the aspects together: production design, costumes, the locations, and to find all the studios where we shoot. What I had in my mind is to talk about how easily we criticize artworks and pieces of art that someone put a lot of effort and research and pain and creativity onto. I think the word of CatWalk helped me a lot to find out the arcs, the emotional arcs of the characters, because it's a quite intense word. This led me to an answer of how those characters react. Costumes, it's a whole universe for the CatWalk, because it's not only just a costume that they can wear, it's just a costume that represent their community or who they are. So I really wanted to have this discussion with a costume designer, where I found Chloe, which is amazing. Together we discuss of who are those characters, what is their past, where is their goal for life, the future. I think she's brilliant because she brought into life the whole universe of the characters.
And follow along with the film's journey in the link below, and check out the full interview that's released on our channel later this week.
This week, Jake and I went to the Art House Cinema in Crouch End to watch All We Imagine as Light. Let us tell you a little bit more about it. In Crouch End on Tottenham Lane, you will find the Art House Cinema. This 2-screen, 170-seater cinema is a cozy, artistic hub with great emphasis on up-and-coming artists and community.
As well as their mixed program, which features a range of indie, foreign, art house, and more mainstream releases, they also hold free screenings of short films and a bi-monthly short film festival.
Artwork from local artists are displayed on the walls and are sold via the cinema, with all proceeds going to the creators.
The cinema also supports local breweries and bakeries, providing high-quality North London produce.
The Art House ethos is a belief that art and culture should be for everyone.
We took our seats and settled in for All We Imagine as Light.
Next, we'll be discussing this year's Grand Prix winner at the Cannes Film Festival, All We Imagine as Light, which tells the story of 3 women in the working class in Mumbai. I thought that this film was quietly beautiful but slow. What did you think?
Quietly beautiful but slow is a very good representation of the film. It is achingly beautiful, I think, absolutely, and that ache is felt by the characters because, as you said, it's about 3 women of different ages. We sort of go for the young, a more middle-aged, and a slightly older lady as well. And all their stories, all those characters are so very enjoyable to sort of be with. They feel like real human beings. And I think that's what the film really strives for. But you're right, it took a long time. And it took a long time to sort of say what it wanted to say. And I didn't mind that in the beginning, because I felt like, oh, we're just flies on the wall experiencing these people's lives. I think you really feel a lot of repression and a lot of, in the youth, you see blossoming love and you see blossoming sexuality. You see coming to terms with breaking traditions, Indian traditions, such as arranged marriage. There's a small idea of class throughout it as well. Of course, they come from a lower class, but like the actual challenging of class is mentioned a few times and is really seen by just how they suffer rather than what they do to overcome it.
It's a difficult one to put your finger on because, and I felt this with films like, I mean, After Sun is one of my favorite movies. And I think it follows similar principles in the sense that it is this quiet portrait of relationships. However, what I argue with After Sun is that you immediately feel the weight and the stakes of the story that is being told. Whereas this one, it has to wash over you, much like the water and the coast later on in the film. I thought the performances were utterly real and authentic. I felt so much for these women. I think that so much of a performance is in the eyes, and I think that they brought everything forward. I mean, even Pavarti's character, like you don't realize the weight that she's gonna have on you, and then she's this like joyful firework of a character.
I think my favorite character, actually.
She just bounds into the scenes that she's in, and she takes up the space that she has to, where you have Prabha, who kind of like sits on the side and is a bit of the wallflower. She's very reserved.
Dealing with the most repressed feeling and repressed trauma.
Oh, completely, really. Yeah. And you're taken on that journey. And then Anu, who is this blossoming flower, like you said, she's so new to the world, and you really, really see that through Divya, I believe is the actress's name. Her performance, it's utterly unique and down to earth and grounded, and I think they bring the roots of this story forward. And I think without them, I struggle to see whether I struggle to imagine whether I would have been as invested if not for the performances being so all-encompassing. And I agree. I think that this film is poetry. Something that I noticed that I think is particular to indie films like these that are quieter and slower and more poetic is that the way that they use blues in this film, it shows that progression. I think in the beginning in Mumbai, it's busy and you have this kind of blue light coming through, and they're wearing their blue uniforms, and the clothes that they wear, even when they're off, it's all blue. And then as soon as these desires start to almost take hold, like they could almost have what they wanted. Anu can almost have the love that she wants. Prabha can almost have this image of her husband back to her, or this connection to him when she receives that gift from him. Varti has this kind of moment where she could maybe save her house. And as soon as those things are almost possible, that color is drawn out from the film, and you're in this kind of overexposed coast.
Absolutely. I found that what was most striking about this film from the character point of view, to go back to, they are delivered brilliantly. I agree with you. The film itself is a thesis on being a family, or being a mother or a daughter or a sister, but none of these characters are actually related. They are indeed, they have these connections, these otherworldly connections that do combine them, that make them intertwined, and it feels very, they remind me of people that I know.
Yeah.
You know, it reminds me of my own mother, my own grandmother, my own sister. It felt very connective in that tissue. And I really loved certain aspects of these people's journeys. And it isn't painted as actually suffering. When they actually move to the coast, and when it seems like the negative option, they engage in dancing, and they engage in just being together, eating around with one another. And, you know, we look through Prabha's eyes, and she's very worried, and she experiences a lot of stress and anxiety. But then she slowly eases out of it. And it becomes into the beautiful idea of the film that is a more accepting point of view. It's not trying to rise above anything. It's more about accepting your circumstances and accepting others for who they are. And there's a bit where she scolds Anu for her actions as a young person. But then, you know, she's more jealous and more envious of the situation she's in, of true, real, blossoming love. And that's something that comes through absolutely masterfully, is young, but real, very real love between Anu and Shiaz. And they are, you know, the typical, you're not supposed to be with this person. The idea that neither religion really matters, it's just who they are, and they want to experience what young people want to experience. They want to experience sex, they want to experience youth, you know, even Anu wants to experience passion and alcohol and all these things that are traditionally a big no, but it's really, and in the end, it's all about, you are supposed to. So what I really did appreciate about this film was that it was a coming-of-age story for those three different ages. It really did explore aspects of youth, of middle age, and entering an older age as well. With Parvati's character, who's older, and son has left the family, but still wants to exist without being infirm or trapped in a life that she doesn't want to live. All these people want their own lives, and they seem to be trapped by tradition, trapped by other people making choices for them.
There were many moments in the film that I felt were very beautiful. However, I was slightly bored at times. The cave scene was the one scene that I felt every nerve in my body wake up.
It had a jolt of energy. It really did.
There was maybe it was the chemistry between the actors, which was electric, or maybe it was the way that scene is written. It's just stunning, and the writings on the wall and the context of it just sets it up to be such a gorgeous moment in the film. And I think that was a marvel in and of itself. But I will say that I did feel slightly bored through the film.
I feel that the film really achieves its excellence, and why it has received such great review and success at Cannes, was that aesthetically it is a brilliant film.
Oh, yeah.
And that includes the scripting, the dialogue, the poetic talk about Mumbai as a city is brilliant. The little drops of actual poetry and voiceover in the film is brilliant. The way it looks, the way it's framed and shot, the capturing of fireworks and light, quite fitting for the name, and then also the music, which is so subtle. It's not a film which has music present throughout, but when it does show up, you feel the weight of it. This twinkly, and to be a bit naive Western, because I'm not so aware of Indian cinema, but it feels very, that is a connective tissue, because the music feels very like a traditional score. It has beautiful piano, beautiful sound design in the music, escaping as well. Soundscaping is the word I'm looking for. And you just feel the energy. I felt that it really complemented the weather in this film as well.
The constant rain, it just has this appeal of heaviness and desire, and that's why I say it was an ode to desire, even through the music. The song that plays, those twinkling notes, The music is called "The Hopeless Wanderer," which I think is just
brilliant.
the perfect.
What an album title!
It's incredible that they chose that piece of music, and I really think that "The Hopeless Wanderer" is such a great way to kind of describe this entire film. Full of gorgeous moments, perhaps a bit slow at times, but I think overall it's one that after you watch it, you'll sit with the themes and really feel this weight of your own desires along with these women and the story that they go on.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly put. And the final piece of music is an absolute banger.
Oh, it is incredible.
Oh my God. We were just sat in there
like
just vibing to this track. I will go and download the soundtrack. Highly recommend.
As I will.
The soundtrack and also the film.
Yes, it was great.
Now we come to the last film we're looking at on this week's episode of Cinema Spotlight, the re-release of the 2004 horror spectacular, The Polar Express. Now, usually I would pass this off to my co-host, but I have to say, I hate this movie.
You've got the passion, and so I'm going to let you run with it.
Thank you, Dee, because I despise it. I despise it for many reasons that people talk about a lot, which is the way it looks. And yes, it is groundbreaking in being the first film in motion capture. Maybe a few more years down the line, they could have tried to achieve this feat. But there are other aspects of this film that I just find, as when I watched it as a kid, this was not one that I'd watch often. But when I was a kid, I felt something was off about this film. And the real thing that I have an issue with is that this film gives me such a sense of anxiety. It is anxious. Everything feels like there's terror in the eyes and emotions of these children, and it's not whimsical. Tom Hanks is terrifying, absolutely terrifying. And I can't stand the looks on these people's faces, because it does look like wax. It looks like people are autons from Doctor Who, or I think the Gromit as a plasticine creature has more emotion and he doesn't talk. Kermit the Frog has more emotion. He's made of felt. And sorry to spoil the illusion, kids. And these human beings are the most alien, horrible creatures. I don't think there's a plot to this film. I think the music is saccharine and doesn't fit. The weird musical numbers that just seem like they were thrown in there by executives.
I'm going to stop you right there, because Hot Chocolate is the banger of the century.
Hot Chocolate? No, oh my God. Tom Hanks screams through that movie like in bloody terror. I'm just like, he is so angry. Like, so
he is
aggressive.
Very angry throughout the entire film. But I do agree.
Oh, you do agree?
I do agree with you. However, as terrifying as this movie is when you watch it as an adult, and yes, it is wrought with anxiety, and I did feel that when I used to rewatch it year after year as a kid, I will say the feeling that it captures of reaching that very real point in everybody's lives where you wonder whether you should believe in Santa or not. I think it does have something to say with that. And that will possibly be my only positive argument for this film.
Okay.
Because there is some magic sprinkled through this movie.
Dark, black, twisted voodoo through this movie. Now, this is the thing. I don't mind that Tom Hanks is everywhere. But the thing is, and we discussed with Return to Oz last week, that I think that, children's films should have this element of horror and just to gauge that. But that's through, as long as you've got central characters who prove to children that you don't have to be afraid.
Yeah.
Hero Boy seems terrified through the whole thing. And even when they're doing their Toy Story 2 moment, going down the chutes, it feels like they're not having fun sliding down this thing, which you might actually use as a moment to be like, oh, this is quite terrifying, but in the moment it's actually quite fun, because everything's got this Christmas magic.
Get ready, they're going to be suffocated by presents.
Yeah, they're going to die, and and everyone is horrible.
Even I would say that even the train is like, it's this like lumpy gray, like metal image. It's like painted a little, maybe like add some jingle bells or something.
Yeah, you could. I mean, I guess if it's trying to harken back to the book or the trains of the era that it's set, this weird sort of 30s, 50s.
Sure,
blend.
yeah,
but
yeah.
Even then, I think you're right. It is very dark.
But yeah, I think like with all of that in mind, I will say like even the opening scene when his parents are checking in on his sister and then they come into his room and you have that initial introduction, at least me watching it as an adult, like it brings that back in, that goes, when did I stop believing? And the end as well, like when the narrator kind of sums everything up and brings you back to, I mean, regardless of whatever age you are when you're watching it, you are reminded of, maybe I can still hear the bells because I do still want to truly believe.
Yeah, it's a nice assessment of what belief is in that regard, that you can believe about, the spirit of Christmas doesn't just have to be Santa Claus, but just sort of the experience. There's a bit of an angle where, is it all a dream?
Yeah,
was it all a dream?
yeah.
Is it truly real? And like, I do like the bell moment. It does at the very end. And this film is quite old, so spoilers obviously, but he can still hear the Christmas magic. And he says, I still hear it to this day, even though everyone else lost it, because it's just a personal journey of belief or faith. Maybe it discusses the idea of faith better than Conclave. Who knows? But I feel that what is the main argument that most people have about this film is the aesthetics, that I think the music is trite and doesn't actually complement the terror that we see on screen, the sort of extreme.
It is iconic though.
But I also think, but it's also the same as Elf has the same very similar score. It does,
yeah.
And then also, if I'm being really musically nerdy, it's actually Sibelius Symphony No. 5 Mysterioso that has the same sort of magical quality. A beautiful piece of music, highly recommend. But it sort of takes that and adds the Christmas charm to it.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't have the same impact. Whereas in Elf, which uses the music,
even so, it still has this kind of like twinkling aspect to it. No.
Yes, but what I see on screen is the fires of hell, and so I can't. I think the music is doing a lot to try and save some of the slightly more aggressive sequences. And this is another thing, the aesthetics. And I appreciate, the positive I can say is this film had to crawl or wriggle so that later films that develop motion capture, what we see now in fully realized with the Planet of the Apes movies, especially, those are probably the best example of motion capture. And of course, what they did, Lord of the Rings previously, at the same time this was being developed, necessary tools for the advancement of filmmaking. Mm-hmm. However, it doesn't work right now. It's too primitive. And the comic relief, I don't think works. I feel that a lot of the kids are actually voiced by kids, and then suddenly this 40-year-old man doing this really nasally, oh my God!
The know-it-all is the worst character ever.
It feels like very 2004. Oh, we need a comic relief. But I just think I was watching it and I was like, this doesn't have Christmas magic. I feel on edge. I do not feel the spirit of Christmas. And
I will say, that middle section, but I do think it does slightly save itself in the beginning and the end.
The end is better. Santa Claus showing up and just understanding that it is all about this belief structure.
And Tom Hanks is just warm as Santa, and he's just warm as a person.
He has a really warming voice, and that's the voice from childhood. Woody from Toy Story is a very relaxing, tranquil voice. However, all the other voices he uses outside of Santa just scarring, sonically scarring.
They are a lot. I will say.
I don't really know many people who hold this movie above in this sort of roster of great Christmas movies.
But it is still in this canon of people rewatch and it's a lot of people's the Christmas movie that they watched when they were a kid, and they show it to their kids, and it becomes a thing.
If I ever show this to any future kids of mine, I deserve to be locked up.
Deeply apologize.
This is I've been very negative about the film just because Christmas is on its way, and I've seen 2 Christmas movies that have made me feel so anti-Christmas. Again, talking about Red One, that film has left quite a severe impact. But I would watch Red One over this film.
Maybe all you need to do is just hear the bells.
If I hear the bells,
you hear the bells, and maybe you'll get into it. Maybe you'll get back to the Christmas spirit. Jake.
Maybe.
I think you are right when it comes to the emotion that's translated through the eyes. Like I said in the review of All We Imagine Is Light, like all the emotion of any film is, for me, communicated in the eyes and in the facial expressions. And when you're not able, for technical reasons, to represent that, it does leave the film devoid of any sort of like truth or emotion.
I'm not recommending it. I say keep it, hide it away. I don't want a golden ticket. I don't want to hear those bells anymore. I don't want to get on.
And beware of the top of the train.
Oh yeah, I would pull that emergency brake.
Yeah.
And I would run away.
Go home.
Go away. Gosh. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
So, Dee, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. You've been incredible.
Thank you for having me. It's been such an honor.
Oh, the honor is all ours.
Oh, stop it.
Now, I must ask you.
Yes.
What is your favorite of the week?
I think I'm going to say Conclave. I thought All We Imagine Is Light was beautiful. I think that it'll sit with me for a long time. I would love to rewatch it in a little bit and see if I change my tune a little bit. But I thought that Conclave, visually, performance-wise, scale, effect, was my favorite of the week, bar its plot issues, which we've discussed at length. I think that Ralph Fiennes is up for that Oscar, and I think Stanley Tucci is up for that supporting actor award as well. I think they were masterful. I think the script is going to be up there with the nominations. I think if the cinematography doesn't win for this film, then I'd be very, very interested to see what else comes out that will match it in terms of like visual striking scale, because that shot of the umbrellas across the square like floored me.
No, I agree with the cinematography. My favorite of the week was Polar Express. Good to watch again.
That
really
was
fun.
really loud. Sorry.
No,
Sorry, soundies.
Now, this is a hard question for me because I feel that All We Imagine As Light was the best film I saw, and I would recommend it, but it's a hard one to recommend because it is long, and therefore that can alienate some viewers. And I'm going to say something rather bizarre, is that I'd probably put Conclave as the one that people should go see, because I'd love to know people's opinions of whether they agree or disagree with my points, because I really think that it has a lot of pluses.
It will spark conversation.
It will.
For sure.
So in a bizarre turn, I would recommend Conclave.
Okay.
And be wary, though. Think about these actual characters. If you want to just see good acting, you'll see it. But if you want a really deep retrospective on faith and morality, I don't think it's it. But really, go see for yourself.
Yeah,
So.
I would agree. I would say, All We Imagine Is Light is like usually what I would go for. So it surprised me that Conclave kind of like beat it a bit this week in terms of like my favorite.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much for watching Cinema Spotlight.
Next week, Reuben will return and we'll be watching Night Bitch, Rumors, Unstoppable, and Solo Leveling Reawakening. So, yeah, tune in then. Thank you so much, guys.
Hope you enjoyed.
And thanks to Dee again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And then